In the 1930s, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt addressed the nation through a series of radio broadcasts known as the Fireside Chats. His aim was to reassure the common man that our society would recover from its troubled times. But we're far from 1930, and I deal with a different kind of fire. For a new era of worldly frustration, we offer a fresh conversation. I'm Greg Carlwood, and these are the Higherside Chats.
Welcome to the show, Higherside Chatters, drinking a little drink, smoking a little smoke. From sunny San Diego, I'm Greg Carlwood. Today we're going to be talking to Foster Gamble, the main attraction at this year's Conspiracy Con, and the creator of the Thrive documentary, as well as the Thrive movement, which is attempting to move us from the matrix of corruption, manipulation, and slavery into a system that works with rather than against the natural state of the planet, which should be thriving. But before we bring him in, we're going to catch up a bit with THC co-host and contributor Kyle Pruneville. Kyle, my man, how's it hanging?
I'm doing really well, despite
Excellent.
the chaos. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird, crazy shit going on out there. Our rights are definitely being infringed upon. Domestic terrorists are being assassinated without trial. But, you know, Kitchen Nightmares was cool this week.
Yeah, that was a good one. Solid episode.
So what's up with you, man?
I don't know. I mean, speaking of TV, I've been getting into this show, Adventure Time.
Really?
And
I've heard about that show, but it seems kind of juvenile.
I think on one level it is. Like, some episodes have that appeal, but there's a dual theme because some episodes have such rich symbolism and deep meaning. I'm, like, blown away with some of them. I ponder these episodes for days afterwards trying to figure out what they meant.
Really? Do you have an example of that?
So there's this one episode where Jake and Finn are the main characters. They're the boy and the dog.
Okay.
And they're trying to build a battle dock, a kind of like dock you go through it. There's all these obstacles, super dangerous, and then you jump into the water. And so it's taking them forever, but an iceberg comes and these businessmen are found. They thaw them out. And then these businessmen are all wearing suits and have briefcases, and they immediately want to go to work. And so Jake and Finn, decide to put them to work, and these guys build the battle dock for them. This is the first thing that they do, and they're great at it. They finish it in no time, and it's just cool because the metaphor for this, then Jake and Finn actually go through the dock, and what happens is they're jumping over obstacles, there's saw blades, axes trying to, chop them up. They get cut and bruised. They jump through this fire ring, and they just barely escape, and they get into the water, and then they're, like, huffing and puffing and all bruised, and we're like, whoa, that was sweet. But, on the surface, that means nothing. The episode just moves on. But I think about this, and what the businessmen were able to create was something that was dangerous, was extremely risky, was only fun because you felt like you were going to die, and at the end of it was ultimately pointless, and even if you succeed, you come out damaged.
Yeah. That's what businessmen do.
That is what businessmen are fucking great at. That's what they've constructed this whole world to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. You used to see that symbolism, that dual meaning, the double entendre in a lot of old Looney Tunes cartoons, but I feel like that's kind of lost in a lot of today's bullshit. But Adventure Time definitely has a following, and I wonder if that's part of the reason why, but I can't get past that shitty animation. I don't know.
What's up with you, man?
Same old, doing the thing. But, a mutual friend of ours, Fernando, is going to be coming out to San Diego to visit, and apparently this is going to be my initiation into the world of DMT.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Yeah, I'm kind of psyched about that on the heels of your last article for THC, Helpful Tips for Psychedelic Trips. I mean, you've obviously been experienced. You've been initiated into the DMT cult, if you will. But what do you think I should expect? I'm kind of psyched. I'm kind of nervous, but I'm definitely ready. I feel like I've got a lot more knowledge about it than a lot of other people do before they go into it, maybe. But what do you think? What should I be ready for?
Well, I borrowed the DMT Spirit Molecule book by Rick Strassman from you.
True.
And so that was sweet. And one thing that they go into in that book during the sessions is that because it's a laboratory setting, it can become kind of like uncomfortable, or that sometimes interferes sometimes with the experience that people have. And so tying in with my article, what I would say is just do a relaxing setting. This is not, I mean, it's not like acid, it's not like mushrooms or something. You're not going to pop some DMT and then go hang out at a bar or anything like that. Like
Right.
You're going to lay down, and part of you is going to die, and you are going to face your own death in a certain way, understanding that, like, it's not a physical, actual dying, but it's some kind of transformation where you leave all sensory experience and delve into a new form of sensory experience that once you're there, it really feels like words are impossible to define what it actually was that happened. But
That's awesome.
you're going to enjoy it, man. I don't know what to tell you to expect. I don't know how it actually translates into language.
Well, when you've done it, what was the most unexpected thing to you, if you can even say?
My reflections now are that after the first time I experienced permanent, or at least lasting, I can't say permanent, but lasting over a long duration of my life, the course of my life is steered into a more emotionally honest point of view. I'm more honest with myself. I cry more freely at random things, like, not random, but when meaning comes at me in my life, when I notice coincidences and synchronicities and things happen in a certain order that it's almost impossible how events lined up this way, that really touches me, and I release truth and honesty, and sometimes sometimes it scares people. Like I worked this last job I just quit, the day I decided to just quit, it was because I cried in front of everybody, and these other dudes, my God, you think that they've never seen a guy cry before.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that's kind of frowned upon. You know, guys can't be pussies, man. Guys gotta.
Everybody is so good at playing this, hey, nobody ever cries bullshit, and we pretend, oh, okay, I can hang with that, I'm a guy. But after you smoke DMT, man, it might be like, you know what, fuck that game. I'm tired of that game, and sometimes I gotta cry.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if it makes you more genuine, that's obviously a positive thing. I mean, I just recently read a McKenna quote that I thought was pretty good and probably relevant, that to deal with this society and keep your sanity requires a certain level of alienation. And that's kind of what you're talking about.
That's alienation for the people who face it, who face truth, or you can just numb. And this is what the majority, and this is what even people who are awakened or going down the path, they numb themselves too. Everybody self-medicates to some degree. But like numbing emotion, numbing how you actually feel, not expressing what you actually want to say, like all that stuff, there's a certain level of numbing you have to do to fit in with society.
Oh, I 100%
Or
agree.
you've got to be totally alienated.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. The numbing aspect, I mean, that is the 9 to 5 for most people. I mean, inside a lot of days, I try not to be. I try to control the emotion, but a lot of times inside I am boiling at the bullshit and the stupidity of what I'm dealing with at work. But of course, it's like, hey, how you doing? Welcome. Anything I can help you find? You guys doing all right today? All right. And, you know, I fucking hate that shit, you know, because inside I'm just like, wow, I am a slave. I'm a fucking organ grinding monkey, you know. I'm just collecting change for some other dude. We talk about that kind of shit a lot, but I am excited to do DMT. I feel like it's something that a person in my position kind of needs to do, and you know, we'll see how it goes. I appreciate him bringing it out, but I'm definitely prepared for something somewhat similar to salvia, but more intense. And we'll see how it goes. But Foster Gamble is calling me right now, so I'm going to not answer that call, but at least wrap up this and then bring him in. All right, well, it looks like Foster is here as planned, so let's get him in here after I torture you once again with the same boring ad for my Conspiracy t-shirt brand, Conspiracies. Right now, it's the only way to really support the show other than a donation via PayPal on the Higherside Chat's website. And it's something that helps me immensely. And I've worked really hard to have designs and a level of quality that I'm really proud of. And Kyle can vouch for the quality. Can you not?
I dig these shirts. I wear these shirts in coffee bars, and people are saying, hey, man, why the hell is there a Pope's mitre on top of an all-seeing eye with squid tentacles? I'm like, you know why.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I definitely get some crazy looks when I'm wearing a Quit Your Job shirt or a What's After Capitalism shirt or a shirt with a giant sheep's head in a suit. People are like, what does that mean? I had someone at a hotel, a person working at a hotel, ask me what it means. I'm like, well, it's a mirror in some ways. And they just were like, they did not get that at all. But I'm like, we're all corporate sheep. And this is kind of just trying to put that out there, that the corporate job is not as great and wonderful and happy as the people who give you the job say it's going to be, or the people who there's this the culture of pretending, and I feel like the sheephead shirt is a bit of honesty, a bit of bold honesty for those who are on that level, and other people it's just going to go right over their head or look like something weird, and that's fine. But I love the shirts. I make the shirts for you. You buy the shirts for me. It's a beautiful partnership. And we're going to be right back with Foster Gamble.
We're here because we don't buy into the bullshit of mainstream culture. We're tired of the mundane, passionless careers we've been shuffled into as a result of this orchestrated debt-based system of rule, and the stranglehold on education and entertainment by cold, soulless corporations. People, yes, we are frustrated. Yes, we are tired. And we reject the pre-approved tranquilizers that are Monday Night Football and an ice-cold Budweiser. But we have to stop hiding. Stop hiding behind the headphones and the Cherry Popper 420 username. Let the world see that the resistance is strong and society is changing. There was a time to be anonymous, but that time has passed. And so the Higherside Chats would like to present Conspiracies as the dawning of this new paradigm in the uniform of the revolution. Because bold fashion should mean more than some celebrity meat dresser frat boy in a silly pink polo. Conspiracies redefines bold fashion as having the balls to reject socially uncomfortable and unpopular truths from your radiant chest all fucking day. Conspiracies.net. Let them know that you know. Bold designs for troubled times. Hard truths. Soft cock.
Here we go, Higherside Chatters. Joining Kyle and I today is Foster Gamble, the man behind the Thrive movie, which follows Foster's path of awakening to the big conspiracy, from the discovery of a natural and sustainable energy system, which appears throughout nature and is embedded in ancient sites and modern-day crop circles, to the realization that this information is being aggressively suppressed by multinational corporations and the banking elite because it would all but shatter the perpetuated lie that we live in a world of scarcity and limited resources, which must be carefully managed by the unjust monetary structure of bondage that they just so happen to have handy. Well, lucky us. And Foster is also one of the main attractions at this year's Conspiracy Con, taking place in the San Jose area, June 1st and 2nd, which is where I'll be hanging out as well. Foster, welcome to THC. How are you?
I'm doing great, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's a real pleasure, my man. I'm a huge fan of the make a documentary and follow up with a movement strategy, which I only really see it with you guys and the Zeitgeist Movement and Venus Project, but you all do a great job of showing how screwed up our society is and that it's not a coincidence and that things won't be fixed until we have some really radical changes to the system itself.
Yeah, well, that was our intention, actually, with the movie. The movie was intended to be a flyer a trailer for the website.
Right, that's awesome.
Because, even if you see a movie 3 or 4 times, which a lot of people are with Thrive because it's very information-rich, still, then you've seen the movie, and then what? And we didn't want to just wake people up to a lot of bad news and abandon them. So we really wanted to provide the tools on the website for people getting as informed as they need to and then being facilitated in getting active. But you can't really be effective in the solutions unless you know what's going on.
Of course. What sets Thrive apart is the central theme of the Torres energy field. That's obviously not found in those other films with a similar theme, but let's get the party started there. Can you kind of explain a bit what the Torres energy field is and tell us how you were able to learn about this energy system amongst all the attempts to keep it covered up?
Sure. That's one of my favorite topics because really it's the icon of wholeness. And I think wholeness is the key to all of the solutions. And the Taurus, T-O-R-U-S, this is not the astrological sign. The Taurus is a donut-shaped whirlpool vortex that it turns out is the single pattern that nature uses to sustain a healthy system, as far as we can tell, at every known level of the universe. You know, from subatomic particles to clusters of galaxy, it's all toroidal fields, and including fruits and humans and planets in between. So it's not just an interesting scientific phenomenon. If our evolutionary imperative, really to survive, much less thrive on a healthy planet right now, is to learn how to create sustainable systems, then I think it would be really useful if we had a template, if we had a blueprint for how to do that. Well, the universe, it turns out, is providing one at every place we can look if we simply learn how to see. And I was first introduced to this by, I would say, a mystical experience when I was 14 years old and riding on a school bus and gazing out the window, and I think the blinking lights through the sun through the tree probably helped put me in kind of a trance-like state. And I had been pondering a lot of questions about energy because I was really afraid of nuclear holocaust. After being trained in duck and cover when I was in elementary school, I figured that wasn't going to work.
Classic.
So anyway, I'm riding along this school bus, and all of a sudden I'm seeing this vision out the window of this vortex that is an atom. And I'm seeing this hot nucleus in the center and with the electrons going around the outside. And then it morphed into a solar system with the hot sun at the center and the planets going on around the outside. And I somehow got the sense that those two patterns were not only the same, but I was somehow that same pattern, you know, roughly halfway between in scale between a tiny atom and a vast solar system. And I became, I would say, obsessed with that pattern. And I would spend all my free time after sports in the afternoon up in the physics lab I was building this sculpture. Nobody knew what I was building, including me. But I was taking blocks of glass that would refract a strong light beam, and I kept arranging them until it refracted the beam all the way around in a circle until the light went in on itself and just created this glowing circle. And I turned off the lights, and I knew that was it. That's what I had to build. You know, I felt like the guy in Close Encounters of the Third Kind who had to build the mountain out of mashed potatoes. It's like, I don't know what this is, but my friends were saying, you know, it's beautiful, but what is it? And I said, I don't know, but that, I think, might be the fundamental energy pattern of the universe. So I went to my physics teacher, and he said, thank goodness, what a fascinating idea. Let me know, you know, keep following that, and let me know what you come up with. I just didn't know I was going to be following it, you know, for the next 50 years. But it really led to the movie Thrive. And the reason we started with it is because it is the template for solutions. And as we have looked at the problems, anybody who's gone on our website and sees that we explore all what we call the 12 main sectors of human endeavor, and we've explored them all in depth. We've identified the most critical issues, we've followed the money in every issue and every sector, recommend solution strategies. And what we found was that the good news is that every one of those problems is human-made. Therefore, it can be human fixed. It's not like we've got some giant meteor coming toward planet Earth or something like that. These are all things that we've done either through intention or our own ignorance. And what we've basically done is break apart whole systems, whether it's an economic system, an agricultural system, an ecosystem, a media system, whatever. We've broken the wholeness. But if we look to the principles that are embedded in the torus, principles like centeredness, integrity, balance, the reciprocal flow of energy in and out, things like that, then we can look to see how do we redesign our own systems in a healthy, whole way. And you asked about the energy application. What I found in my pursuit of new physics, you know, for decades, was I was finally led to some inventors who were aware of this toroidal dynamic and were applying it with absolutely exquisite technologies that were accessing energy in a clean, safe, and limitless way. And as opposed to our usual ways of accessing energy, which is, you know, burning things or crushing things or exploding things, it's a very old macho paradigm of, you know, control and manipulation. And what we mentioned in the movie is that the opportunity now is to learn to have a more feminine approach, more accepting of what nature is, able to be humble enough to dance with that pattern. So I've visited many so-called free energy or new energy labs, and the ones that I've seen that are being successful, every single one of them, before and after the movie, are somehow creating and mimicking this toroidal pattern and then just tuning the device into a level of resonance with its environment, almost like, a couple of guitarists tuning up. And when you hit those right frequencies, the universe just starts pouring out as much energy as you need out of these systems. So it's not just a wonderful technology, it's an actual paradigm shift of, if we blend with the way energy moves in the universe, there is infinite abundance.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the masculine, feminine aspects to this energy, because in the pre-show, me and Kyle were just talking about how his experiences with psychedelics have kind of opened up an emotional blockage that is kind of perpetuated by our society, that, men should be more bottled up, and it's kind of the feminine energy that allows for, a wide range of emotions. So that's an interesting tie-in. But, this...
Yeah, let me just follow up on that for a
Sure.
second, because that is such a core and important point. That, these devices are wonderful, but really, ultimately, we're talking about aligning with our own life force, with our consciousness, with our emotions, with our thinking, with our breathing, and so forth. And I think that that's a great example of whether you're trying out entheogens, psychotropics, which will alter your consciousness and give you a glimpse of other realms, or whether you're doing it in meditation or therapy or sports or dancing or whatever. Fundamentally, it's that quality of aligning with, resonating with the life force that opens up the possibility of really a thriving life at all scales. So I just wanted to shine a light on what Kyle said, because I don't think there's a more important point, especially bringing it back to our own human lives.
Absolutely. Well said yourself. But as far as the free energy is concerned, this is a topic of intense debate among people in my life that I've tried to introduce to the conspiracy world, because a lot of times people look at everything that's screwed up and they know it's screwed up, but they accept it because they're under the impression that alternative energy sources are underdeveloped and too costly. So to really make the leap from, the governments and companies are doing the best they can with what they have, to, something like, no, they're purposely suppressing free energy technologies that could wield unlimited power and energy for everyone, and they keep us shackled under a grid of their control. To make that leap really requires the fact that this technology and these devices are ready now, But
yes.
What have you seen from your research that could make the case to people who might not be all the way convinced yet?
Well, there's a few things that you can say that help with the discussion, but nothing is going to convince a lot of people until they're sitting in front of a device which isn't plugged in and is just pouring out clean energy.
And that's fair.
And I know the first time that I took my wife to one of the labs and she saw it for the first time, she just started crying. It's just such a moving experience to realize the beauty of nature in that way, and to realize that human beings have learned how to access that. There is no necessity to be burning fossil fuels and polluting the skies and causing asthma and, fighting over taking oil from other people's land and all that stuff. It's totally obsolete in terms of what's actually manifest right now. So it's much more actually a political and strategic challenge than it is a technical one. I can't talk about specific devices at this point because it wouldn't be safe for the inventors, and I'm also under non-disclosure agreements with virtually all of the best inventors. But I can simply say my own opinion from my own experience, and I visited labs with highly skilled scientists, physicists, engineers, and so forth, is that the technology is available. My sources tell me that the shadow government has had this technology for at least 50 or 60 years. And that's one of the reasons why they know who to suppress, because they know that this technology is real, so that if they find out about someone accessing it in the correct fashion and being successful, unfortunately in the past, those people have gotten their doors kicked down and they've been threatened and their equipment has been stolen repeatedly. And some of the inventors have been injured or killed or just disappeared. So it's a very, very real situation that we're in right now, and that's why these inventors need to be so careful.
Right.
But someone asked me in an interview recently, what did I think would be the kind of time frame for this? And I just found what came out of my mouth was that I honestly believe, from what I'm seeing, that within 5 years there will be at least 200 companies around the world who are selling various types of over Unity new energy devices.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge. We actually had a guest not long ago, Stan Deo, who has a wild story about creating flying saucers using a similar type of vortex. And, once he was talking about possibly filing a patent, that's when people in suits came to him and said, maybe we should just show you what we're working on, because you're stumbling upon it. And it is weird, but that it almost seems like that patent system is a gateway to, really highlighting who's messing around with stuff that the government might not want to messing around with.
Exactly. The patent office has basically taken over 5,000 patents applications for alternative energy devices and just forbidden their inventors to continue. So, the obvious question is, why is that? When we're having all these struggles over oil, why don't they just let this stuff come through? But I think your listeners would have a very sophisticated understanding of the fact that, first of all, these technologies, which can democratize energy so quickly, where people can have independent, off-the-grid devices that run their homes, their villages, their cities, whatever, that threatens a multi-trillion-dollar piggy bank of the oil, gas, coal, and nuclear industries, which still want to be able to sell the resources that they're controlling. Mm-hmm. So that's level one. Level two is those industries are also controlled by the same kind of central banking families that we describe when we follow the money in Thrive. And those people aren't just interested in money. They're interested in controlling people's lives through energy, as well as food, media, education, money, etc. But the last reason that I'll mention, because some of the people in the conspiracy realm have not necessarily explored the ET domain very much. And Adam Trombley says it very clearly in our movie, that the suppression of free energy and the suppression of UFO and ET information goes hand in hand, because if people recognize that there are beings here from other planets, other solar systems, other galaxies, much less other dimensional realms, the first thing they're going to ask is, how'd they get here? Mm-hmm. I don't think they're burning Chevron fossil fuel, for 30,000 years to come from the nearest solar system.
Right.
So they're obviously accessing energy from anywhere in space and have developed some sort of fuelless propulsion. And this ties in with the comment that you said your prior guest had mentioned, that also the free energy devices tend to go hand in hand with anti-gravity devices. Because when you start rotating these magnetic fields at certain frequencies, they will, number one, develop a low-pressure area above them and start to rise. And secondly, they will tend to disconnect from the space-time continuum that we're accustomed to. And that's why there are, just hundreds and hundreds of reputable UFO sightings where people talk about these ships going thousands of miles an hour and all of a sudden making a right angle turn, which would obviously, in traditional physics, crush any being that was inside that, even the materials themselves. So something else is going on. And I've had the privilege to talk with some very credible people who have been either abducted or invited onto ET ships. And several of them were offered the opportunity, because of the relationship that was developed, to be shown the drive on the ship. And that's what we illustrate with the computer graphics briefly in Thrive also. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them has repeated this as the story about this same double torus rainbow dynamic that not only propels the ship, but it creates an independent gravitational field around the ship that protects anyone who's in it.
Yeah, it is really hard to find a clear narrative when it comes to the extraterrestrial information, because even as far back as Nikola Tesla, people were talking about he had credited some of his discoveries with messages from other beings. There's a lot of speculation that this Torres energy is the same kind of thing that helped build the pyramids. And
Yes.
I guess where it gets kind of weird is you've got abduction stories that are positive, like the ones you're describing, then you've got some that are extremely negative with harnessing or, extracting DNA and extracting, messing with their sexual organs to create hybrids. I mean, and there's, as you know, there's tons of disinformation in this realm. It's hard to really know what's true and what's not true, but I find it hard to believe that if they're trying to present us with this information that it would be so mild. I feel like they would do it in a bolder way. Do you have any explanation for why it's so subtle?
You mean from the point of view of extraterrestrial beings?
Right, like it's the contact seems very subtle in the form of crop circles or small scale abductions.
Yes. Well, I'm certainly not an expert in this area, but I've been looking into it for quite a while, and particularly since Thrive, I've had the opportunity to speak to some very knowledgeable people, and where I'm leaning is to the understanding that there are many species of other beings who are visiting us. There are the 5 most commonly spoken of beings from people from cultures all over the world are, the greys and the felines and the reptilians and the mantids and the Nordics. And there are many other species, I think, as well. Mm-hmm. Jacques Vallée, one of the premier researchers, says that probably 80% of extraterrestrial contact is simply telepathic. It's not actual incarnate beings in some sort of material ships flying around. It's actually simply beings that are on different frequency levels who are connecting with us in our consciousness. And that's becoming more and more common. People are doing this, channeling and downloading this information and so forth all over the world. And there's a lot of hoaxsters out there, but there's also a lot of people who are very genuine in this, very skilled, and the information that they're bringing through is quite consistent. And one of the things that they talk about is that these various ET species have different agendas. So from our point of view, some of them may feel very benevolent, others might feel even abusive. And I asked John Mack, who was the Harvard psychiatrist who kind of literally wrote the book on the credibility of UFO ET abductions. I asked him, I got a chance to meet him before he was killed recently. And I asked him that question. Are ETs benevolent, since they're obviously way more advanced than we are in terms of technology, so I'm assuming in aspects of consciousness. And he said, well, you don't assume that, because he said, look how far human beings are beyond rats in terms of the evolution of our consciousness, and then look how some of us treat them in our laboratories. So some of them are here doing experiments, or looking for a habitable planet, or looking to gather some of the resources that we have on our planet that they need. And there are others who are here to protect us from some of those other species, or from flares from the sun or whatever, or from nuclear weapons. There's evidence of all of the things that I just mentioned. So I've come from, thinking that, little green men from Mars is a crazy notion to recognize that, of course, there's intelligent life in this almost boundless cosmos, to realizing that we're actually probably living pretty much in the Star Wars bar.
Wow.
But you're right. It's quite subtle right now, I think, for various reasons, for our own protection, for us to be more ready for that kind of disclosure. As far as I've been able to learn, there have been contracts made between the shadow government and certain ET species to keep things secret for a certain length of time, while that shadow government was was learning from their technologies and making certain trades with them and so forth. So it's a very complex issue that I think is starting to come out more and more rapidly now, as many countries, I think there's 15 countries which have actually opened their UFO files. And a recent citizen hearing that took place just a couple of weeks ago in Washington, D.C. had fantastic expert testimony that's going to be turned into a feature-length film that's going to tour in theaters and so forth. So the time is definitely coming.
Nice.
It's very exciting. All of these people are kind of finding new ways of saying it, because I feel like for so long our cultural belief systems about this topic prevented us from ever exploring it honestly. And it was everybody who was into this was dismissed as being crazy or some kind of, all these different terms that television used to try to make people feel paranoid about what they had experienced. But it has gone by so many names. I think about, you're talking about the possibility that there's all these different alien humanoids with different agendas communing with people, and how similar that is in my mind to when you get inspiration, when you have a new idea. It's like you suddenly come upon a thought. Where did that come from? When they wrote like the Odyssey and Iliad, I've talked about this in previous episodes, but they talked about in those times there was a consciousness that people kind of felt like the gods were communing with them. You could, by different acts, just by drinking too much, you commune with certain intelligences. You become different. You take on changes because you're almost like channeling is tied into this as well. But there's so many different kind of like, I don't know, it's we're trying to explain what this phenomena is, but science has prevented us from exploring it for so long that everything immediately gets dismissed as like, oh, here we go again with this nonsense. But really, we're encroaching upon it. It's coming from every direction, and it's almost like it's going to overgrow. These belief systems are going to have to decay because they no longer like serve us as a collective.
Well, this goes back to that same agenda we were talking about with the suppression of UFO information and free energy and that type of thing, because I believe that the ultimate suppression is of people's consciousness. Because if children are supported in being healthy, critical thinkers, then they're going to be questioning the whole notion of authority. And our culture is set up so that through the state-run schools and through the churches, basically people are indoctrinated from a very young age, virtually every day of the week, 6 days of the week for a lot of people, many hours a day, into believing in things that they might not otherwise believe in. And the fundamental tenet of both the church and most churches and of the government is that you're not whole and sufficient, and therefore we're going to have authority over you. We're going to take care of you, but we're going to also have to tell you what you need to believe. We're going to tell you what's true, and we're going to tell you what you can and can't do, and we're going to take some of your stuff, basically, whenever we want. And as people are waking up, and Kimberly and I have had the privilege to be traveling to over 30 cities in the last year with the Thrive movie and with solutions workshops and so forth. And everywhere we go, it's packed houses of people who get it, because they have, watched Thrive, or they've listened to shows like yours, other independent sources of media, and they're doing their own thinking. And they're waking up, and they've been going through that challenge of, wow, this is tough information. I'm not sure I want to know this, but maybe I should. And they're talking with their friends, and then some of their friends might, start to reject them because they're talking about stuff that's been, insulted and demeaned in our culture. So it's a real challenge to wake up. But we are really heartened by the fact that millions and millions of people are waking up across the planet. And as they wake up, they want to take action. So that's where the whole conspiracy movement that you're so familiar with has really kind of tilled the soil so that the seeds of real solutions could find fertile ground and then really grow. And that's what I'm going to be talking about at the Conspiracy Con, is that the Thrive movement is intended to be, in a sense, the antidote to the conspiracy or conspiracies. And so we're literally looking to turn the conspiracies inside out, the global domination agenda. And if you took a left-handed glove, and you turned it inside out, you would look at it and you'd see a right-handed glove.
Yeah.
Because it's literally reversed itself. And we're, in a sense, doing the same thing. Because in my decades of research, I came to realize that despite what people think or want to believe, the people running the agenda are not stupid or incompetent. They are very smart. They're really shrewd. They're also really nasty, but they're very competent in trying to accomplish their agenda. What they're lacking is the wisdom, the heart, the connection to the life force, the ability to love and tell the truth and all that kind of stuff. So they're at a significant disadvantage ultimately. But interimly, they've conned the whole planet into giving them power over money and military and media and all the rest of it. So they're in a tremendous position of control, and it's well documented that they have set out to take over all of the 12 sectors that we identify. And that's education and media and science and arts and economics and governance, and the whole picture. And they are almost done with that task. So what we're wanting to offer through the Thrive movement and just the tools and information that we make available is the opportunity to be just as organized, to really approach all 12 sectors, but to approach it with the goal of liberation rather than domination, and to align it with the life force rather than go against the life force, and to have the movement be really transparent rather than secret society, covert, hidden agendas. And people are responding so enthusiastically to that opportunity. And I'll say one more thing about that, which is it's not just an idea. As we were making Thrive, we had actually worked with Barbara Marx Hubbard and a number of other organizations and kind of thought leaders for over a decade in developing this 12-sector model. And in 2007, Kimberly and I live in Santa Cruz. In 2007, these planes started coming out of Monterey, which is the neighboring county, and droning over our heads at night and dropping unknown chemicals over the entire county. And they announced in the news that, this was a very safe thing. It was just a synthetic pheromone. It was a scent just to confuse a certain moth that was going to be devastating California agriculture.
Of course.
And it was perfectly safe, except it would probably be a good idea to stay indoors and close your doors and windows.
Wow.
So, of course, we got very suspicious of this, and babies started getting sick, and birds started dropping out of the sky. Bees were dying by the masses. Fish were washing up on the shores of the streams and the oceans nearby. So people were kind of running around. A lot of us were running around kind of in a panic about this whole thing, and we weren't really being effective. So finally, Kimberly, bless her heart, said, why don't we gather some of the local activist leaders in our living room and show them this sector model and see if that would help get organized. So a few days later, we had 30 people in our living room. We showed them this sector model, and they loved it. So 3 nights after that, we had a town hall meeting in Santa Cruz where 300 people showed up. And we had some informative lectures from some experts on toxic sprays and so forth. And then we had 12 sign-up tables. So the lawyers could go sign up. If they wanted to do something about this, the lawyers could sign up at the justice table, and the artists at the arts table, and the media people, reporters, investigators, and so forth could sign up at the media table. And we had scientists and environmentalists. And so we formed teams. And I was on the economics team because I've had a lot of experience at following the money. And so anyway, that day was when random, well-meaning but ineffective activism turned into like a laser beam of effectiveness. Yeah. And within a few weeks, I had followed the money back to the source, and unfortunately, it was just what I suspected. It was a personal earmark from George Bush Jr. To appropriate up to $1 billion from Homeland Security run it through the USDA, which is totally in bed with Monsanto and gets royalties on GMO foods and so forth. Then that would go through the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and then they would spray us with this stuff. Well, the first thing we did was we did a petition and got Governor Schwarzenegger to stop the spray, interimly, and make them tell us what was in it, because they had refused to. Wow. Well, it turned out there were 10 chemicals, and 6 of them were toxic. There were cancer-causing agents, there were mutagens, which alter your genes, and there were endocrine disruptors, which can render you infertile. So it was exactly the kind of dumbing down, making sick, depopulation agenda that I had been really afraid of, but not willing to speak publicly about, because people hadn't seen Thrive, and most people would have thought I was completely nuts. Anyway, the long and short of it is that our scientists went to New Zealand, where they'd had a previous incident. Environmentalists started collecting data. The doctors were checking out people's health issues and so forth. And the mothers got involved in protests. And we had a protest that took over the Golden Gate Bridge one day. And within 6 months, we had entirely stopped the program. We had won one lawsuit, and another big one was pending. And at that time, Schwarzenegger pulled out his support for the spraying plan, and ultimately they declared a moratorium on the spraying. And a $1 billion program direct from the president and Homeland Security was stopped with volunteer activity and probably about $30,000 to $40,000 in funding. So it's a really clear example of how important it is for us to be organized. In fact, our kind of main trophy for this, besides clean skies, was that we, through a Freedom of Information Act request, we got some internal emails from the CDFA, and one of them said, we're kind of shocked. We were expecting some resistance from Santa Cruz, but we had no idea they'd be so well organized.
Wow.
So that's the same strategy now that we're looking to teach to budding solutionaries all over the world. And probably in late summer or early fall, we're going to be launching a global campaign to teach people over the internet how to use this model. And we're going to use chemtrails as the example, because basically chemtrails is the same issue. It's got the same sort of toxins in it, but instead of being done over 11 counties and 7 million people in Northern California, it's being done around the entire globe from 30,000 feet instead of 1,000 feet. But it's really the same type of agenda, and we can stop that issue in that same way. But more importantly, these types of strategies can be used in any issue. And on our Solutions Hub, which we launched on our website over 6 months ago, there are now over 750 groups have signed up from around the world, and they're working on over 120 different issues and in 90 different countries. And now through our website, they're beginning to connect with each other and share best practices. So if somebody's done a lawsuit, they can share that paperwork. If somebody's done a petition, or they've got flyers or artwork or health information or whatever, everybody doesn't have to be recreating the same wheel. People can just learn from each other and then also tie together through all of these sectors throughout the world.
Wow, man. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty inspiring, that story. And you make some excellent points. On one hand, I get super frustrated that we're being manipulated. Meanwhile, we're having a debate if it's even going on. But then on the other hand, you can get lost in just analyzing the manipulation and just identifying it at deeper and deeper levels. And, like you said, that's not really getting anyone anywhere either. So it is really important to turn it into something solutions-based, which, the Thrive movement seems to be the way to go. I mean, I know when I was involved in the Occupy movement, they had a similar setup in terms of different groups, media, law, outreach, and the problem there is that it just seemed paralyzed by a lack of leadership, because everyone is so used to being told what to do. Here's a bunch of willing people standing around saying, if someone would just tell me what to do, I'll go do it. But, it's just paralyzed by inaction. And, of course,
well,
the police were not.
One of the approaches that we're taking is not to try to create and grow and manage some big global organization that's centrally controlled. That's exactly, one of the major problems on the planet. So from the get-go, we have wanted to empower self-creating movements. So we're not out there telling anybody what to do. And if people want to join into our network, they only need to agree to two things. One is if they're using sectors, we ask that they use the same sector names, because that allows us to coordinate very powerfully worldwide. And secondly, that their solutions not include any violations, so that it's not a matter of creating some new tax or going out with a militia to force people to do something. Using force to protect individual rights might be necessary at points, and I totally support that if it's needed. But using force to tell anyone what to do or to take their money against their will is absolutely the problem that's taken our civilization to the brink of total self-destruction. So I encourage people, if you're interested, go browse, go to thrivemovement.com, and then go to the Get Involved section, and you'll see in that section there's something called Engage in Solutions. And when you go to that page, you'll be able to see the different groups from all over the world, and you can search by zip code or by sector or by issue and find the people who are already working on what you want to work on, and then see, do you want to learn from them? Do you have things to share with them? Do you want to join one of those groups? Do you want to start your own group? It's really about empowering people to self-create, not telling anyone what to do.
That's awesome. I mean, I love that approach. I mean, and it's something I've considered doing, and if we could build free energy devices, it would be a lot easier. But have you ever considered saying, look, I'm not getting any younger. This system is too established and powerful to overcome quickly, so we're going to buy a big plot of land in some tropical place without much of a government. We're going to build some free energy devices and organic gardens and build a perfect free society. And then just invite more people until it expands to a size that can't be shut down. Have you ever considered something like that?
No, absolutely. I think it's a great idea because it starts building the communities and the knowledge base and the skills. The alternative whole systems approaches to energy and to community and to food and all that kind of stuff. It's an embodiment of the kinds of approaches that we need to have already functioning and growing when the old systems collapse, because the old systems are collapsing very dramatically. And it's not just incompetence. The powers that be, as far as I can tell, they want the economy to collapse. They want the food systems to collapse. They want the independence of the internet to collapse and so forth. So I'm not under the illusion that there's anywhere in the world where you can really go and hide a very large community that is running on free energy and liberty principles. But at the same time, this is the right time to be creating them. And I think that very soon there will be so many of them that they can't be shut down. And the old powers are losing their power, so that the Western banking cabal that's been running this fiat, Federal Reserve system is crumbling as we speak. Their banks are hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt, and they're in debt to not only other corporations, individuals, all of that, but also to Asian countries who've been loaning most of the money to make that possible and are continuing to on an ongoing basis. So fortunately, my sources tell me that there are very large and well-funded groups in China and Japan and Indonesia, the Philippines and so forth, who are coming closer and closer to sharing some vast wealth with the world in very humanitarian ways, and using the leverage that they've got through the gold that they own, through the nuclear weapons that they have, and the million-man armies to protect themselves from the scourge of the kind of imperialist invasions that have been going on over the last 50 years. And they are interested, I'm being told, in not only converting the world to asset-backed economies, which are going to be way better than these fiat currencies, which put all the power in the hands of a few, but they're also interested in using their wealth to fund the best humanitarian projects that they can find around the planet. Now, I've been hearing this from quite reliable, but still private sources for quite a while, and now I'm beginning to see things come out, even in the public media, that are showing evidence of this. There's a woman who used to be a general counsel to the World Bank, a woman named Karen Hudes, who just came out a few days ago, announcing this, that there are banks all over the world that are already in the process of converting to not only using precious metals as currency, but using them as the backing of paper currency. And I think this is getting to the level now where it's unstoppable. So it's going to be a dynamic transition. But just what you said, I think the more people are building their own communities, just like the Free State Project in New Hampshire and Galt's Gulch down in Chile, and they're emerging all over the place. Mm-hmm. And these are the seeds of the culture, the thriving cultures of the future, based on the principles of integrity and wholeness.
Yeah, let's on the subject of banking, because that's something that's a huge thing for me. I mean, the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist movements have pretty much convinced me that to really weed out greed, corruption, and power struggles, we have to overcome any monetary system, which of course has its own challenges. But and of course you want to do away with a fractional reserve system. But in your perfect world, how is a monetary system being used? I mean, how can you protect its integrity in the long run?
Well, it's a really important point. And I did a blog on this recently, and I've been in contact with Peter Joseph and some of the other people from the Zeitgeist movement because
nice.
I really admire so much of what they've done. It's just been a huge wake-up call to the planet, that series of movies and the movement. It turns out that this is one area, the getting rid of money, that I am not in alignment with their approach, because I think that the problem is not money. The problem is dishonest money. And I've invited some of them whom I've talked to recently to just start using no money anytime they want and see how it goes.
Right.
So if you need a program for your computer or a new computer, and you're living in the fields of Kansas, and what you've got is a lot of corn and cows, and you try to affect that trade with someone from somewhere else on the planet who happens to have made just the program or the hardware that you need, good luck, in accomplishing that. There's a lot of inconveniences. And we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. An honest monetary system is genuinely an honest medium of exchange. So that instead of having to trade cows for software programs, you can actually trade, some sort of currency, or you can trade some sort of credits, or you can trade bitcoins, or whatever you want to call it. You can, trade puka shells, but at least you've got some sort of medium that's mutually recognized that makes it a heck of a lot more convenient. So what I ask the people from the Zeitgeist movement is this whole notion of moving beyond money, is it voluntary or mandatory? Because if it's mandatory, and I have real concerns about that, because they talk about these re-education camps and so forth. Well, that's what the Nazis talked about. That's
right.
What the U.S. government did to the Japanese and so forth. That's scary stuff to me. And fortunately, they have assured me, some of them recently, that no, all of that and the, circular city planning and all that stuff, that would all be voluntary. It would just be the technical facilitation of progress. And I said, great, then I'm all for it. But the key word for me always is voluntary. If somebody's trying to make me do something other than stop hurting someone else or taking their stuff, then we've got the seeds of tyranny, which have led us to the brink of destruction. So I'm excited about coordinating with movements like the Thrive movement, because obviously there's tremendous potential for organization in the alignment of pre-existing groups. So one of the things we're working on with the Solutions Hub is developing the protocol where groups can interact and share information without ever having to give up their own moral philosophy or the trust of their own internet network. because anyone who has a large following has developed that because people are aligned with their philosophy and they trust their behavior. So nobody wants to give that up. And so you don't want to be forced to share information that you don't believe in. So one of the things that we're doing is encouraging groups to coordinate in networks, but then have the coordinators of the groups be able to gate any particular information that gets sent out. So if somebody sends me something about they've got this wonderful idea for a solution and all it'll take is another $1 trillion in taxes that's now going to be laid on the backs involuntarily of the people, well, I don't have any interest in sending that out to my group, and I would let them know that. But that doesn't mean that I couldn't coordinate with them on other projects. In our three-stage solution strategy that we lay out briefly in the movie, but in much more depth on the website, there are really three tracks. And the first track honors the best of the progressive movement, which is basically using other people's money to be compassionate, to take care of people who've been most screwed over by the system, and to provide subsidies to go back to organic farming, and to provide health care to those who are so damaged that they are not in a place of prosperity where they can afford it. But that's all a transition stage, and the money doesn't come from creating new theft of people's wages. It comes from money that is now being spent on waging war and paying unnecessary interest to a corrupt Federal Reserve. There's enough money in doing just the reduction of those two things, or the elimination of those two things, to not only restore health, prosperity, and the environment in the United States, but literally all over the world. So that's phase one. Meanwhile, phase two, or track two, is already in process, and that's the shrinking down of this involuntary government to just the protection of human rights and the commons. So the government isn't out there telling you what you have to do. Their only role is to protect you from being violated and to protect the wholeness of ecosystems in the same way. And then finally, I believe that there will be so much success and prosperity and security and freedom as those two phases are going along, that people will finally realize that there are independent, non-authoritarian ways to solve all of these problems and handle all the different systems and so forth, such that we'll end up growing beyond any need for involuntary taxation or involuntary authoritarian government.
Yeah, I'm really interested in these areas that we have to, just by force, we have to play by these rules. We have to go along with it. You got to pay your taxes, and you have to do everything that they're telling you to do. It's all because we feel like we're on board. It's kind of like you're on board the USS America. It's like, hey, we're all on board the same ship, but certain guys are in charge of the ship, and certain guys own the ship. But because you're on this ship, you have to play by our rules. Otherwise, we're kicking you off, and you're basically going to drown. Because, like, if you're cut off, that's part of what the system does to people. Is just says, well, if you can't make it, then you're the problem, and it's your fault, and you're just a criminal. And now we'll just apply a label and say, well, we don't really have to deal with this whole class of people, and we'll just call them, these are the guys that made their own problems. But really, it's that the government has no systems approach for actually caretaking for anybody, or for the environment, or for our happiness is just totally left out. Nobody even addresses the fact that nobody's happy, and we all have to self-medicate to deal with the way things are. But how do we get to honesty? How do we relax, and how do we get a moment's rest? I know so many people are so busy. Like, when do you get the time to be contemplative, to relax, to express how you're honestly frustrated with the way the world is?
Yes. And that situation that you're describing, as you know, is no accident. If you want to control people, you dumb them down, you keep them sick, you keep them in debt, you keep them afraid and confused, and they're going to be easier to control. But you're not going to have a thriving world, and ultimately you're going to have a revolution. And hopefully it can be a peaceful revolution. But really, that's the opportunity that we have now to move beyond this whole illusion that anyone should have authority to coerce anyone else and to use violence, to initiate force for anything other than self-protection or the protection of the environment. So I believe that that's the most important conversation on the planet right now. It's the one I'm especially dedicated to being involved in the rest of my life. Along with the specific solutions and the free energy and making people aware of the predicament that we're in. Ultimately, since I think all of the solutions are based on aligning with the Torah, which is honoring wholeness, which is honoring the wholeness of human beings, therefore freedom, I really think all the solutions are based on that. So, as you mentioned, I have the opportunity to speak at the Conspiracy Con coming up next weekend, and I'll be there on Sunday. I'll be there all weekend, but I'll be speaking on Sunday afternoon and then participating in the speakers panel. I think it's the last event on Sunday evening. So I'll be there if people want to come and hear my talk and involve themselves in the question and answer. But also I'll have a booth where we can just chat about these kinds of issues, because I've been very informed and supported and inspired by the whole conspiracy movement. And I think it's laid the groundwork where now we can take all that information and, as I mentioned, turn it inside out and move on together towards these solutions. Learn how to have these conversations really effectively with people without losing our friendships. And I'll be talking about that in my talk there, how to have these difficult conversations about these strange topics with people without, totally turning them off. In fact, getting on the same page and having them as allies. So I invite people to come to the conference and stop by and say hello if you can. I'm going to need to leave in just a couple of minutes. So I want to thank you guys for having me on your show. I really admire what you're doing. I think that the lifeblood of the transformation that's needed is independent media and courageous people like yourselves who are willing to go anywhere in an honest, respectful, and on-purpose conversation.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Of course, I'm going to be at the Conspiracy Con as well. I'm going to be selling some T-shirts and definitely listening to the speakers. I made the point in the last episode talking about Conspiracy Con that people really do need to support the alternative movement, because, you see people spending hundreds of dollars to go to Coachella or hundreds of dollars to go to Burning Man, which Burning Man is kind of a little bit more noble of a cause. But, I don't want to go to these conspiracy conferences and see them empty, or see an older generation and no young people coming in taking the helm. I'm the youngest person at these lectures. And, we got here in San Diego, we have Comic-Con coming up, which is one of the biggest events in the country, just so you can be the first one to see the new Spider-Man trailer or the new, right. Or you pay money to go into what's considered a private mall where people are just selling Batman figurines. Yes. It's like you're paying money to get into a consumerist fest, and there's no benefit to that. Well, so spend your money, come out to the Conspiracy Con, better yourself, learn some things, buy some of my T-shirts, the important things.
Well, I'm happy to report that people don't need to deny themselves what they're particularly interested in, but what's happening is these various interests are starting to overlap and synergize. Kimberly and I have been invited to and have gone to numerous festivals to present Thrive and discussions around these topics, including Burning Man. And what's happened is these festivals have been very effective in basically giving people a place to celebrate, a place to learn about themselves and be creative and meditate and dance and that kind of thing. So it's raised the energy and the camaraderie to a very high level. And now what they have done is taken that level and really said amongst themselves, okay, we need to take this energy into transforming the outside world as well. And that, because I was surprised, frankly, that they were inviting us to all these conferences. But we've been really well received by very, open-minded, bright audiences. So I'm seeing an integration going on. And I think the same thing is going to happen with Conspiracy Con, that people who have been duped into thinking that there aren't conspiracies out there, the evidence is so overwhelming in any media, even mainstream media now, it's becoming obvious that people are starting to show up and and validate these conversations. And I think more and more people will be turning out to hear the experts, share their knowledge.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I'm going to let you go. It's been an excellent talk. Obviously, if people haven't seen Thrive, they should definitely check that out. And I will say
it's available for free at thrivemovement.com. And I encourage you to buy the DVDs as well, because you can share it then with your friends and support the movement.
Yes. And I was going to say, I think one fact that really helps your credibility is that you've made the movie available to watch online for free. It speaks volumes about your integrity, because I've seen a couple documentaries come out where they make the claim that they just want to help people and get knowledge out there. Meanwhile, they're hyping up parts of the film to be more than what they really are, charging $10 for a stream, stuff like that. So really, I think that should be noted, and I commend you for being so cool about letting people see your hard work for free.
Well, thank you very much. Our number one goal was to have as many people benefit from it as possible. For the filmmakers out there, I have to acknowledge that it was a huge, huge hit in our revenue, where we actually had to let go of a lot of our staff just to keep the movement going, because people say, well, people will donate, they'll send you, money anyway. And some people do, but we are not in a culture yet that does that at a level that can support a piece of art and information that was as expensive as Thrive was to make, and the movement is to sustain. So I encourage all of you to, support the movement by buying DVDs or donating to helping this information and the strategies and tools get out there.
Excellent, man.
But thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Greg. It's really great having a chance to converse with you, and I hope to see you at Conspiracy Con.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you then. Thanks again.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, take care. Well, there it is, Kyle. That was pretty good. How'd you feel about that little chat there?
It was good. I really liked the topics that we touched on, and I really felt there was a connectedness. There was we're talking about big themes here, not so much dialing down on specifics.
Yeah, I agree. I don't talk much about the show itself, but the reason I started the show is because I'm a huge fan of Coast to Coast and even Alex Jones to an extent, but I just feel like the guests that are on the show are always so much more interesting than the host. And I wanted to create a show that let the guests speak, and also it's not about me confirming with my own independent research what they say, because that's all Alex Jones ever has people on to do is confirm his own independent research, which is just ego service. And then on Coast to Coast, I feel like it's all softball questions. And I'm not trying to have a gotcha show, but I want to get deeply into the material. Just the questions on Coast to Coast seem way too vague, way too broad, and you never really get into the meat of things. And that's why I think people call him George Snorri. But it is what it is. So I think that a lot of people have been reaching out to me lately and saying that they love the way THC approaches these interviews and approaches these subjects. And I think that's great. I'm glad that, without even saying much about it, that the concept behind THC is kind of shining through. We're a conspiracy and paranormal show for the non-religious right, because when you get down to it, it's really odd and hypocritical that someone would identify with the conservative or religious right, because you're talking about Conspiracy 101 is that it's a shell game between two talking puppets that don't mean anything. It's a pro wrestling theatrical performance, and these two sides are just there to keep us in tension. And so that that's there to just keep tension high, but yet you're still identifying with one side and criticizing the other side. It seems completely stupid.
It's ridiculous. I mean, people are listening to too much nonsense content, watching too much TV. If you're watching the cable news, it's a big problem. Because none of that stuff, it's all pre-filtered, so you're not going to get good information that way. But I feel like it's a generational thing. The younger people are doing new media. The younger people know about podcasts. The older people, there's some who are hip to it, and then there's vast numbers who have been stuck doing what they do day after day forever, and they just can't. They're going to have a little bit tougher time breaking out of their paradigm.
Mm-hmm. And the biggest criticism of Thrive that people have is they say, it has a pretty heavy New Age feel to it. And I'm not going to deny that. And there is a certain amount of cheese to that approach, in my opinion. But, I mean, I would say that's a pretty petty reason to ignore or fail to pass on tons of great information. I mean, I'm sure Monsanto and GE would be thrilled to see the conversation be about the appeal of Thrive's style rather than getting hammered with questions pertaining to the content. I mean, who gives a shit about the stylings of it, versus Zeitgeist versus Thrive? I mean, the information is pretty much the same, and that's what we need to attack.
Yeah, I feel like with each iteration, like with Thrive and then this serious documentary, even if some of these things aren't what they thought they would be, or maybe there's another Zeitgeist movie and it's maybe not as good as the third one was, but with each time another thing comes out, it kind of like further enriches this meme, this big, subversive idea that, like, hey, what a lot of these people are talking about, what the Higherside Chats is all about, is this is really the truth, and for some reason we have been taught that we can't handle the truth. That the truth in a lot of different areas, like, oh, what the military knows, yeah, you guys can't know that shit. Like, what we're actually doing, you can't know that shit, because that's all state classified, And just the whole idea that there's certain things that are off limits for you to know for your own good, that is not, I can't trust that. I cannot put faith in that anymore, and it makes me feel really creeped out, and it's like, why are these authority figures in a position where they control my life, and yet no decision I make influences their lives?
I mean, that's a great point. Kyle, my man, it's always a pleasure. By the next time I talk to you, I'll probably have finally granted my consciousness the pleasure of melting into the astral dimension and coming face to face with the totality of the universe in whatever strange way I decide to present myself to myself, whatever the fuck that means. But I'm going to smoke some DMT, and hopefully I'll be a better man for it. So that's a pretty exciting thing. Do you think I should I film that?
Do not film it.
Do not film it. It'd be embarrassing, I believe.
It's not oh man, you gotta melt. Talk about what your body's gonna look like while you're in a different dimension. You really need to melt.
Right.
You're not gonna be worried so much about filming yourself.
I gotta make sure that my hair looks good if I'm gonna really be astral projecting.
Yeah, well, if you're gonna make an appearance into the spirit realms, you better make sure it's a good first impression.
No, but of course, I would like to have some type of. I would like it to be a part of THC. I don't know if I want to film, what looks like falling asleep, while something crazy is going on in the mind, because obviously it doesn't translate visually. But
no.
It might be a good idea to capture some audio immediately after the event. Maybe I'll have Fernando. Maybe I'll pre-write some questions and give them to Fernando, and then maybe coming out of the state, we'll do a reverse interview. I don't know. Ideas. These are just ideas. I'm spitballing. I'm throwing shit out. You can catch it. You let it drop. Throw it back. Do what you do. But, as always, people, check out Kyle Printeville's weekly column, Conversations with the Other, on the newly redesigned Higherside Chats website, thehighersidechats.com. Kyle covers some great topics, provides an insight that enriches my mind on a weekly basis. And, man, I thank you for putting so much time and effort into making THC something more than just a podcast. It's awesome.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. I like the format. I like to get tweeted out to so many of the followers of the show. And if you saw the comment that somebody left, I haven't responded back to it, but I really want to. In the Helpful Tips for Psychedelic Trips blog post, there's a really honest comment from a mom. She says, yeah, I go through this. Yeah, I take my kids to school, and I work the job, and I pay the bills, doing all the same bullshit, but underneath it all, I know the truth because of what I experienced through my own psychedelic journeying. And you were talking about that kind of in the intro to the show too, how there's this duality, there's two lives going on, the one part of you that knows the truth, and the one that plays the character that has to be a character in order to survive in society, because, as Foster said, you can't live without money.
Touché. All right, people, that's a wrap. Kazam just showed up on Netflix, and I got a weed brownie with my name on it, so I really got to get going. But I love you guys. I don't feel worthy of your time, but then here we are, when you could be watching Kazam too. So, okay then. I will see you at the Con 2013. Enjoy your day, people.
Suppression.